All right. Hello, everybody. How's it going? Good evening, good night, good morning, wherever you are joining from. How's everybody doing? If you can confirm that you can hear me clearly, you can see me clearly, then I'll move on with the real meat of this session, which is the latest past paper, the May, June, not the May, June, the March 2025 exam that recently passed in obviously just in India, but that's the paper we have now available to us. So I thought, why not look at it? I'm sure all of you would have already looked at it, would have attempted it already, hopefully. So this might be a good chance for you to see if you were on the right track. At the same time, I'll keep this session open because this would be my last session before the P2 paper comes around. Anything you want to ask me, anything that's been on your mind about it, maybe exam day situations. So, anything that you feel that you might want answers for, I encourage you to just type it up in the chat window and I will respond to it as soon as I can. Right, so that should be the process we take in. Let me make sure that my chat window is nice and long so I can read all your messages. That's fine. All right. Hello. Yes. Hi, Fire Goblin and Mahinsa. How are you? Laiba, yes. Jenny, yes. Yes is the word. Can we get good marks if I write one good point and evaluation paragraph? Look, for your 12 marker, what the things that you absolutely need to do is make sure that first of all you bring a balanced argument, which means that you have the advantages and disadvantages of whatever concept you're being tested on equally shown, and then you get to the evaluation part. So one good point, if it's just the advantage and you're not including the disadvantage of it, then the balance of it isn't there, and that's where you lose marks on analysis. And then if you just give a one-sided evaluation, obviously it's not going to get you full marks for that either. So always remember that your 12 marker requires you to use all the writing skills that you learn, right? So knowledge, get the right concept in; application, make sure the context is given; analysis, make sure you're giving a balanced argument where you are talking about the advantages and disadvantages. For example, there's a question that we'll be doing today where they'll ask us whether the business should opt for price skimming as a strategy, right? And in the case study, they also mentioned that they could go for competitive pricing. So in a situation like that, you are clearly given two types of pricing methods and you've been asked to consider which one is better. So in that situation, you can't possibly have 1 point. You will have 1 point or one paragraph, as you might want to call it, for the price giving part, one for the competitive pricing part, and then your evaluation comes in giving a judgment and so recommends and so on and so forth. So that's what I recommend. On the day of the exam, don't be stingy with your writing. Be as compelling, be as confident about your point as you can be, and just remember that there's a sequence that we already know. They tell us how many marks for each thing. So spend that much more time on evaluation, for example, in a 12-mark question. So those are the things to remember about the structure of your answer. Okay. And then you do. I can't personally do it. My accounting is good, but it's not that good to teach you A levels if it's the day before your exam. But I will ask the accounting teacher if he can make himself available, and perhaps we can bring something in. Okay. Paper one was a little bit hard, and now afraid of paper two. Okay, so I after looking at paper one, if you ask me, I don't think it was a tremendously hard paper. Yes, there were a couple of questions in there which which aren't big parts of our syllabus, and they appear, for example, sale and lease back. I'm sure that would have been a bit of a shock. Something that I kept repeating, that you make sure that the newer chapters that have been brought into the syllabus, you know them really, really well. And important about that, they are capacity utilization, the full chapters that have been brought in. They are budgets and management. And the two 12 markers came from the latest chapters. The first 12 marker, which was on management, and the second one was on budget. So, the emphasis on the newer chapters in the syllabus, which obviously changed in 2023, that should be more, that should have been more. And maybe that's where section B should have gone a little bit better. In terms of Section A, I don't think there were too many surprises. The difficulty level, I don't think was very high. In fact, I do think that the A threshold would not be lower than 32, because it may even be 33, 34. So it's just a guess at this point. But don't be disheartened, because the good thing is that paper 1 stands for 40% of your grade, paper 2 stands for 60% of your grade. And paper 2, the grade threshold in comparison to paper 1 tends to be lower. So therefore, you have a lot of the grade still in your hand. You have the potential to bring it up, a grade, absolutely, maybe a 2 to grade increase if your paper 1 was decent. So, don't just this is not the time to be afraid. It's the time to double down on your efforts. Just trust in your processes, and whatever you didn't do for P1, of course you would learn a few things or two. So do those, the practicing, the last minute revisions, maybe that need to be changed. Making sure you get a good night's sleep, that's also important. So there's other factors that we can learn from that. Okay. No. Okay. Yeah, Baran, so again, you have to see what the question's saying. A 12 marker does not have one particular way of writing it, right? They usually never just ask you to talk about one point. There will be a comparison to something else, and that's what you have to identify. So I in no way do I think that one point and evaluation would be enough. How exciting, sir! How exciting it would be if it was during Eid. Yeah, I guess we've done it with the Choti Eid. We can do it with the Badi Eid. How about before the? So I'm gonna keep this session for AS. Unfortunately, I will be coming back with P4 sessions and P3 sessions in the next 2 weeks before the exam. So just for that, we will have a session, absolutely. One for P3 separately and one for P4. That's the guarantee. Can the calculation questions are confusing? I couldn't understand them. Look, the calculations. First of all, you've got to make yourself believe that calculation is not math. It's if you know the concept and if you can remember a formula, that's all you need. You're not asked to do complex algebraic equations and such things. You're not asked to calculate angles. So it's not really math. It's simple formulas, simple ratios that you need to remember, and the only way to do that is practice enough of it. So if you go on our website and on the store, you will find a P2 calculation workbook, where you'll find the different formulas in one place. You'll find all the right questions to practice. You will see the ways of answering them. So the best way to do it is to repeatedly just do calculation questions hour after hour after. We give it 5 hours. Today's business time should just be for calculation, for example, and you just get after that book. So that's the way to go about it. And with enough practice, you end up remembering the formulas too. And one more thing I want to say about calculations is that if you don't know the concept, you won't be able to do the calculation. If you know the concept, you know how things work. For example, market growth. Market growth is always an increase of percentage of certain numbers. So if you know the concept, you know that you can calculate percentage change. New minus old divided by old. We've done that since 5th grade, 6th grade. So, those are the things that, concepts make the calculations easier. So focus on that. I gave for paper 1 for section B, but now I have to do that plus read the case study plus do the 3 mark questions within the same amount of time. Mr. Fag Gobner, I think what you're saying is it's taking you about 15 minutes more than what you would expect, right? So first things first, your first case study. So there's 2, right? You have 1 hour 30 minutes, which means that you have 45 minutes per case study. your first case study will take you longer than 45 minutes for sure, because the first 5 minutes of your exam are just pure shock, right? You're looking at, now, most people are blank, right? You just think, oh, this isn't what I prepared for. And then it takes a few minutes for you to get in your zone and then start writing. So, your first case study is 50, maybe even 54, 55 minutes sometimes, because you take real good care with it. You want to make sure you get the first question in, right? And in the end, what you end up seeing is that you're about 35, maybe 40 minutes at best for the second case. Right now, I've seen that it's difficult to obviously replicate the same speed with the second one. So you might struggle with completing the final 12 marker, but that by no means you should skip anything in the middle. What I mean is that your first case study, do it in the same sequence as you do, take as much care as you want, and when you get to section 2, don't attempt your 12 marker first. You still go in the sequence of questions given. You knock off the easier questions out of the way. Perhaps maybe if you're not good with the calculation, you might want to leave it towards the end, but I feel personally calculations are guaranteed marks. You should know it with enough practice. You should be able to perfect it. And if by the time you get to a 12 marker you're not able to fully finish it, just make sure you throw in most of the evaluation bits, your judgments, your recommendations, because 12 markers, half the marks are for evaluation. So you might have to sort of squeeze through your final 12 marker. But if you want to do really well with time management, when you're practicing at home, give your mom the phone with a 45-minute timer and say, Mom, at 45 minutes, you come and take the paper from me. So, until it's forced upon you, you won't learn how to do it. So maybe at home, do that. Yeah, this stream will remain on YouTube on our channel. So if anybody want to recommend to watch it, it should be here. A-star tips. First thing, be good children. Be nice to your parents. Do good deeds. Because from the A to A-star, the distance is usually covered a lot by the good deeds that you do. But other than that, just sticking to the right formats, knowing that your 8 marker requires how much knowledge, application analysis. One a mistake that I see students repeatedly make is that they end up having the same analysis for 2 points. That's a big no-no. Different points, different analysis. That's how you're going to get full marks. For your 12 markers, make sure you're giving more of your judgment and evaluation rather than just advantages and disadvantages, and just no margin for error, right? The best way is to make sure you've done enough past papers, because whatever you see in your exam, whatever case study you get is going to be a surprise. There no 2 case studies have been the same for any year. So if it's going to be a surprise, then you just make sure that your processes are good, right? You know what to answer, how to answer, what sequence. And with that, and a good night's sleep and a healthy breakfast, I should do it. I don't know anything. Will I be able to pass? You know more than you think. Trust me. I am like you. I was always afraid that I don't know things. Something that used to help me was that whatever my revision notes were, just a night before the exam, I would close my eyes and I would picture them. I would have seen them so many times that I could picture the the sequence of it and just keep going through it, and that way you start getting the confidence that it's not like you don't know anything. You know a few things, and those few things can be put together to make an answer, right? So you know more than you think. You've been at it for a year. um, Yeah, we keep at it. To be fully prepared, you need 5 years worth of past paper practice. But the bare minimum is last 3 years. Without that, there's not much hope for a good grade. Yeah, like I said, I will have the accounting teacher schedule something, and we'll get back to you. Okay. Is there any way to improve my answer? My time is good, but I want to maximize my. Yeah. So, Javi, I hope I'm getting that right. The idea is to, what I want my students to think, that what my goal is, that the moment you sit in your exams, you don't have to worry about the sequence and the structure of your answers, because the only time you should be spending on is just figuring out the case study and taking the information that you need and putting them in your answering format, right? And that comes by knowing what each question is worth. So one marker is 1 mark of knowledge. You spend 2 to 3 words on it and you move on. 3 marks are all 1 line of knowledge, 2 lines of application. You fill that in, and then your analysis for 8 marks is different, 12 marks is different. So your with enough practice, you will know the sequence of your answer. You know what you are comfortable with, your best version of that answer. And then the time spent in this, okay, this is analysis, this will go here, this is application, this is where, that's just the best way of doing it. The way I attempt case studies with you guys online here in these sessions, and anywhere else you might have taken it with me, is the way I recommend it to you, right? Read the questions first, highlight the important bits, go in the right sequence that you do, know where to place evaluation, where the analysis. So the formats that I've shared with you, basically, that's the key. You know them, and this, it's all about, it's like a jigsaw puzzle, P2. Information is right in front of you. Sometimes they've even told you the impacts. It's just putting it all nice together and making sure that you don't go outside the bounds of the case study. Answer for the business, take the problems for the business. Those, just, the basic tips that I always say. That's the key. It has to be a mixture of all those things. Musa, I don't think so. I don't believe it. These rumors come around every year. They've been coming around since my time, right? And look how white I am now. So in my even my times of A levels, these were all, even without the internet, these rumors used to be around. So rumors are rumors unless they are fully confirmed, and therefore I don't believe it. From the information I know, I did call Charles. He was sleeping. I guess it was a time zone issue. So if he answers back, I'll let you know. No, you shouldn't hate on the exams, Bunty and Bubbly. Exams are your passage to a better thing in life. You'll do something more, something greater, something new. So these are little gateways, passages to a better life. So you should. I know everybody's anxious about them. I get that, but it's also, there's a bigger prize there, to be earned on the other side of it. So you know, embrace the challenge. There's no avoiding it. Think about it. You spend a year on it already. You've prepared all your O levels to get to A levels. You got here, and you just can't give up on something you've been at it for 4 years. So cheer up and just show the exam who's boss. Yeah, I have shared guest papers. It's again even on the website if you just visit. In the store, it might be. I did share some for the P1, and I've also shared a couple of case studies that I made for P2. So there is one on the website. You can go and look through it. What is my thought on P1 paper? I didn't think it was terribly difficult. It's just some topics that like I said, students don't pay much attention to. For example, sale and leaseback, CSR, people tend to forget a lot. But this was as per my expectations. I expected, like I said, newer topics to be represented, and that's how it was. I think it'll be like a 32, 33A threshold. Okay, Arif, when you ask about evaluation, so how about I'm gonna attempt the question today on evaluation? I explain to you how to process and things. So I have that on my agenda. So we'll go and do that here. So stay tuned. Okay. So do you take A2? Yeah. A2 live sessions will be conducted just as soon as AS paper 2 is done, which is on the 12th. Then the next 10 days until the P4, my focus will only be on A2 students. So P3 and P4, we'll be doing both sessions. So in P1, in 8 mark, I've written on business rather than employees. Abdullah, it's difficult to gauge without knowing your answer, what you've written, right? So it's hard to say, my friend. Honestly, I don't want to encourage or discourage you in any way. So it's hard to say. But if your impact is not talking about what the question wants you to talk about, then that might be a problem. Okay. So can you guys still see me? Yeah, I'm still here, right? So this is what I have for today. So I want to just get to that. Sorry, Abdullah, I don't want to discourage you. I can't comment on something I haven't seen. That's all. Sir, please start. Yes, Vanya, that's a great idea. Sir, start. Yes, 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 yes. So I'm just last thing I want to answer is M's response, and then I want to do a paper for you. Okay. So are we supposed to write advantage? It's 1 in 12 markers, or 2 points in favor and 1 in again? Okay. So with M, the first thing you said, advantages and disadvantages, and then the evaluation. Okay. I'm going to show that to you today when I attend the 12 marker. So all right. So this paper is what I had picked. Like I said, the latest one, and the latest paper is always the closest indicator of what sort of questioning you might see, but we don't see too much variation in paper 2, in the sense that the way it's always been designed and the way the questions have been asked, it's still the same. So what that basically means is that you can even pick up a paper 2 from 2015 today and attempt it, and it would still be great practice for your exam. So there's a lot of evidence of what paper 2s look like. Okay, so we know that there are 2 case studies. Again, if anybody is still unsure, you'll have 1 hour 30 minutes. That gives you 45 minutes per case study. You'll have 2 identical questions, in the sense that information about a business, then parts A to D. Identify, explain, calculate, explain, analyze, evaluate. That's the 6 questions that you have to attempt, and each question's marks will indicate to us what level of detail we need to show in those answers. And I'm going to again highlight them today, so that you know what to do. So the idea is that I'm gonna take you through my way. When I'm doing paper 2 questions, what are the things I'm looking for, what to emphasize on more, and what maybe not to focus on so much. And yeah, one more thing across these 2 case studies, right? So we've got these 2, for example. The first one's called Frank's Fruits, the second one's called Reliable Car Repairs. What is a guarantee is that you will be tested on all 5 units across these 2 case studies. So when you read the questions, you will see that the first case study is part A to D, and the second case study is part A to D. Those 8 combined, you will see that all 5 units are being tested. So all units must be prepared for before your paper 2. There is no chance to be taken with anything. Okay. Again, predictions are focus on the latest topics more, things that have been included in the syllabus after the 2023 update. That's where I think the key is. Other than that, your calculation practice, there's a free 6 marks to be taken. Don't miss out on those. No, there is no difference in the answering structure of P1 or P2. The only difference is that your application is coming from the business, your analysis is also being done towards the business, and your evaluation is done according to the business's future plans. So that's the only difference. Yes, Maya's application is, the business context is coming from the business. Okay. Right. So since this is the first one, let's just do this one. It's called Frank's Fruits, FF. And the way I go about attempting case studies is, the moment you see this, straight away look at the questions first. I need to know what I'm dealing with. What do I need to spend more time on? Clearly, the 12 marker will take most of my time, but I still go in this sequence, because these are your low-hanging fruits. Knock off the easy marks, then worry about how many you might lose in a 12 marker. So the first one will ask me to identify one method of measuring the size of a business, and its part 2 is explain the term primary sector. Now, for part A, you don't necessarily need to compare it to or connect it to the business. But if you do, you still get marks for it. If you don't necessarily lose marks for it. So But I still recommend read the case study first and then start attempting questions, right? It helps to know what you're dealing with. Then B part one, where we will be asked to calculate a break-even number, and then part two will ask us what the limitation of using break-even is. Then benefits of operating as a sole trader, and then whether Frank should introduce price skimming. So I know there's a question on pricing. This is marketing purely. There's a question on business structure. This is business and its environment. And then there's obviously calculation question here from finance, more of unit one. So if you think about it, like I said a little bit earlier, all 5 units are tested. So this is unit one stuff. Question number one, this is unit 5, this is unit 1 again, this is unit 3. And when you see the next case study, for example, you will see that the other units are being tested. Notice here, 1, 3, and 5 are done. The last question here, just in time, this is unit 4. This question here, democratic management style, this is unit 2. Again, market growth, unit 3, and then unit 3 again. So one thing is a certainty that all units will definitely be tested, and we'll be focusing on these ones today. Okay, so see a lot of comment. Okay, Vanya, good. We've started answering. Very good, very good. So I want to read the case study first, see what we have to deal with, and then we'll start going into the answers, right? Once again, there are 4 things that I always recommend that whenever you see that in the case study, make a note of it, highlight it, whatever you do to remember it, because they always help you to understand the case study that much better. The first of those is the type of business structure they are. So limited company, partnership, sole trader, whatever they are. Secondly, the product they are selling. Thirdly, their distribution channel, whether they sell B2B or B2C. And lastly, their objective. Is the best way to understand where the business is standing, what are they trying to do in the future. So the moment I'll see those, I'll highlight it. But as you keep reading each line, the story of the business is being developed. Literally, it unfolds, layer by layer. It's like peeling an onion. You see a little bit of information, you want to see another bit of information. And until you've answered all parts, you are not ready to answer the part D, which is a 12-mark question. So take the sequence that the questions are given in, so that slowly and slowly you start unlocking and understanding the case study. Only then will you be able to fully evaluate in a 12-marker. Okay, so let's begin. And this one says, Frank grows fruit, including oranges, on his farms in country J. He sells his fruit at a market in a local city 1 day a week. So we've got a little bit of information here, so that their product is obviously fruits, where oranges seems to have been emphasized on, and how he sells them is that he sells them at a market. So he has his own shop and he also grows it, which means that he's both in the primary sector and the tertiary sector, and they highlighted in the case study here that Frank is a sole trader. So we now know his structure as well, the sole trader, and he operates in the primary and both the tertiary sectors. So he grows his own fruit. Obviously, fruits don't need any manufacturing. They are great as they are. And when he picks them off, he straight away goes to the market and sells him from his that market where he's selling it. He set up FF using all of his redundancy money from a previous job with a large company. So, large company, had a job, some experience, some know-how of what the world is like. So he was asked to go leave. Obviously, that's what redundancy is. So he used up all of his redundancy money, which means that there is no loan that he's taken. He hasn't sold his share to anyone in the company. There is no partner coming in. He has complete autonomy, complete control over any decision making. Plus, he gets to keep all the profits. He gets to make all the decisions. Plus, he gets to have that direct connection with suppliers, with the customers, all of those things. So We know a little bit about what Frank is doing now. Frank's business objective, now we have the objective here too, is to increase profit by 10% by the end of 2026. Business objective is to increase profit. Now, very clear, very definitive, a smart objective, I would say. Specifically, they're looking to increase profit by 10% by the end of 2026. So, very, very clear, smart objective being given here. Okay. He also has a target profitability of 25% by the same time. What that means is that on every unit he sells, he wants to make a 25% profit. Okay. He uses the data from break-even analysis to make business decisions. The table 1 to 1.1 shows forecast data for the sales of oranges in July 2025. And since we know we are expecting a question on break-even, you know that question of break-even will have information such as fixed cost, variable cost, selling price. So when we get to that question, we will get into all of this piece. Okay. Now Frank has two main competitors: a national supermarket with stores locally. So this isn't just one market. This isn't just one store. These are many stores that Frank is collecting. Obviously they're all competing collectively with Frank, and a shop in the local city selling fruit. So there's obviously two very different types of competitors here. There's a national supermarket and a local shop. Frank's business, now this is where Frank has done well, right? Anything the business does well, you make a note of it. Anything the business has done poorly, obviously you make a note of it as well. Now, Frank's business is very successful as the fruit he sells is fresher than products sold by his competitors, both of these competitors. This is Frank's USP. So some things are good. Fresher, he sells fresher products, which is now his USP. Now, it would be obviously natural to think that since he owns his own farm and then he sells those products, then as soon as he picks, he can decide that, okay, I'm going to go to the market, get there first, and sell my fresh produce, which means most of the people would want to come to him first, right? So that's what he does. His fruit is sold only a few hours it is picked. That's where the freshness is coming from. However, the fruit sold by Frank's competitors is grown hundreds of kilometers away. Customers also enjoy the range of fruit sold by Frank as it varies throughout the year. So two things that Frank's doing well. One, you know that Frank's competitors' product is not as fresh. And then lastly, just give me a second. Yeah, lastly, Frank has a wider variety. So fresh and a diversified product portfolio is what is working out in the form of a USP for Frank. Okay, and that's where he currently uses competitive pricing, but is thinking of introducing price skimming in the future. Now, where do you guys stand on this? Do you think he can use price skimming? I mean, the answer you should know already by knowing this, all the information that's given the case study. What feature allows you or sort of forces you even to go for price skimming rather than any other pricing strategy? What do you need to have in order to have price skimming? I know you know it. I can see it on the screen. I'm pointing at it right now. Yeah, very good, Vanya. Excellent. So, as long as you have a USP, you know that people will come to you. And if people are already coming to you, that's the opportunity for you to start charging a higher price, which is price skimming, right? However, the problem here is that Frank's market is highly competitive, right? He's not dealing with other similar farms or other similar shops. He's got a big local shop who sells local fruit. He's got a national supermarket that has many branches located around his farm. So you know that, if he's too expensive, then people have alternatives. And remember, for essentials, it's in fruit, when there's so much variety, people will easily switch to other businesses even if their product becomes slightly more expensive. So, you know, he has a choice to make, and that's exactly what the last question will be testing you on. That it, yeah, very right, Mikhail. So product differentiation, his variety is differentiating him. His freshness is providing that competitive advantage. So that should force him to go towards price skimming. However, what he really needs to look at first, and remember this is a tip to remember for the ages, is that whenever you discuss a pricing change, the evaluation of it is always that you must first figure out the price elasticity of demand for your product, always. So when we attempt the pricing question today, every time you attempt a pricing question with evaluation, as an evaluation question, you present the argument that if it's elastic, then you know a lot of people will switch to competitors, the national supermarket and the local shop, and that's where you may lose out on your revenue. However, if it was inelastic, then you can go ahead, because if his product is really that fresh and his variety is really that great, then maybe people aren't going to switch to the other competitors, right? And remember, you don't have to calculate, or you don't have to know for sure whether it's elastic or inelastic, right? You can just make the argument that depending on the elasticity, it will be decided whether they should do it or not. Okay. Yeah, exactly right, Shariad. That argument is what I will make in the last part. And this is basically what we are given in the case study. So before I move on, is there anything that we've read so far in the case study that anybody wants me to go over again? Or would you want me to just go into the questions now? Okay, so yeah, let's get into the questions, and as things come up, you keep typing them up. We'll be friends in no time. Okay, so here is the sequence of the questions that we saw, and what my team has done for me nicely is, one, they are helping me answer your queries online, and two, they've made this nice template for me to use. So I'm going to go in this sequence, start with question A part B, and we'll come all the way around to attempt the last question here. So starting with the first one, which is identify one method of measuring the size of a business. One method of measuring the size of a business. Okay. The first one to answer gets thank you and a salute. Come on, shout them out. What do we know? There are 5 in total. I mean, 5 that most businesses use, but all businesses use their own methods as well, right? But if you were to list, okay, good. One is number of employees, absolutely. So in an identify question, which this one is, right? It's an identify, and they're asking us to identify one method, not two. They are not asking you to define it. This is not a definition, so do not define. That's a big no-no. Okay, do not define. Okay, very good. So just 2-3 words, not long sentences. Simply, if I were to write number of employees, that should do the job. Okay, others are also correct. My market share, market capitalization, level of revenue or sales. There's one more. Number of employees, market share, market capitalization, capital invested, and revenue. So there are 5 methods. All you got to do is simply write this, right? So You guys are all correct. Good job, good job. And don't spend too much time wondering over this. Just simply write, just move on. This is worth 1 mark, which is 1 mark simply for your knowledge. Okay. Then the 3 marker is a combination. Okay. And the combination is you need to show 1 layer of knowledge and 2 layers of application. This is important, right? This is what I mean by already knowing the structure of your answer before going into your exam, right? You should know that when I see a 3 marker, I need to have one clear statement of knowledge, right? And 2 layers of application. Right now, what that does not necessarily mean that you need to have 2 lines of application, right? I want to make that absolutely clear. What it means is that when you're explaining application, just explain it in 2 parts, how one thing leads to another, or how this is done for something else. So you know how the actual concept works. Just 2 things about it. Now it could be 2 sentences. It could be, one sentence talking about 2 things or 2 ends of a process. Okay. So one way of doing this would be first explain what primary sector does, right? Primary sector, it includes businesses, involved in extraction of natural resources, right? In its simplest form, that's what this is. Okay. Then the next 2 layers, I have to explain how this works. What is it that they do? I know they get natural resources, but how does that fit in a business context? Right? Remember, your application is the business context. So what I will simply write here is that primary sector provides raw material, right? And then notice how I'm using one sentence to show 2 levels of application. Okay. Primary sector provides raw materials which are used by producers to make finished goods. Okay, so technically this is one sentence, but I have 2 clear levels here. One level shows that there's raw materials and they're being used to make finished goods. That connection is what's explaining how the primary sector works. So that needs to be there. You can if somebody's ever an answer first sector which yeah. So King Empoleon. If you just wrote that, I hope that was just for the first line of knowledge. If that was great, but if that was for your whole answer, then it won't be enough. Remember, you need more detail in a 3 marker. Like Shahryar is done here, but with an example would also be fine. But also, Shahryar, I would bring in another layer here, that these fishing, agriculture, harvesting, which are raw materials for secondary sector businesses. So just a little bit more layer of where primary sector is helping the overall production chain. Okay. Vanya, yeah, the process of answering a 3 marker in P1 and 2 are the same, in the sense that 1 layer for knowledge and 2 for application, like I said, right? And again, I will just make it absolutely clear that 2 layers of application means just 2 parts of how the concept is used. Could be 2 sentences, could be 1 sentence with 2 equal parts within it. Okay. I hope everybody's okay with this one, and with your permission, I'd like to now go to the calculation, which I'm sure a lot of you are impatiently waiting for, because these still send tremors down your spine sometimes. But trust me, These are some of the easiest marks you're going to get with enough practice. You know, it's not math. It's just business concepts being represented in ratios and formulas. That's it. So we know that break even tells you at that point at which there is no profit, no loss, and we know there's a sequence of calculations for it. You don't have to rework the calculations. You don't have to create, you know, new formulas out of it. It's just finding the right number to place it in the right formula. That's all this is. Okay. We're not supposed to have been relevant to the case study in this one. No. So like I said, Vanya, your part A can be done without the reference to the case study. If you want to, you can. That's fine. If you don't want to, you don't have to. That's also completely fine. So let me give you an example here, right? So if what Vanya is mentioning here, that can we link it? If I were to link it, right, let me show you a version of that. My knowledge would remain the same, but how my application would change, that I will say that, for example, Frank Farm grows oranges, right? And these oranges are basically part of his the variety of products, the variety of fruits coming from I guess lands, fields, however, which is your primary sector. So you could use the example given in the case study as application. That's perfectly fine. Or you could do it without it in part A only. Okay. Right. Both are equally fine. But starting from part B, which is what we're looking at here, application is now firmly about the business in question. Everything is about Frank's farm, right? We need to be his best friends. And this one says, refer to table 1.1. And whenever it just stops there and doesn't mention and any other information, that means you only need to look in the table, nothing beyond it. If it said table 1.1 and other information, then you know that there's information outside of the table that you might also need to look at. Okay. So calculate the number of oranges that Frank needs to sell to break even in July 2025. Okay. Now, I know we tend to be hasty sometimes with calculation, just give the number and move on. But make a habit that the first thing you do is write down the formula. Okay. Because if you get your calculations wrong, there's at least a mark to be gained by simply writing the formula. So break even is fixed cost divided by contribution per unit. Okay, simply call that CPU. And we know that CPU is selling price minus variable cost. Okay, so once you calculate CPU, then you present it in the formula. Fixed cost is usually given to you. So it's always this one first and then this one second. So in order to calculate break even, you first need to calculate contribution per unit. And for that, I'm going to take you to the case study. And there's the table. Why don't I bring the table down there? Yeah, I'm going to do the question here. Okay, everybody can see now. Yeah, so these are the numbers we are working with. So we are given number of oranges sold in July, 5650. Sorry. Total allocated fixed cost, so we know that's this. Total variable cost, 2825. Selling price per orange, 0.80. So first we need to fill in all of these numbers. So in order to calculate CPU, our selling price is given here, 0.80. But my variable cost, if you notice here, is total variable cost. I need per unit variable cost. So variable cost per unit, how would you calculate that? Well, if this was your total variable cost for these number of oranges, we can calculate, very good, we can calculate variable cost per unit, right? So total variable cost divided by our output, which basically numbers I'm bringing these ones here and these ones here. So this becomes 2825 divided by 5650. Could anyone help me out here what this number is? Or I'll just take my calculator out. 2825 divided by 5650.5. Right, so this is 0.5. So we know now variable cost per unit, which is what we need to now bring here in this formula. So this minus 0.5 tells you that your contribution per unit is 0.3. Okay, now if that's your contribution, my break-even formula is 0.3 denominator, and this time my fixed cost goes here. Sorry, too many arrows, I understand, but this should become your formula, and this tells us that 1350 divided by 0.3 means that they need to sell 4,500 oranges just to break even in July. Okay, let this sink in and tell me if there's a question. Everybody happy? I'll just quickly go over it again just in case there's any questions. So first you calculate contribution per unit, which is selling price per unit minus variable cost per unit. In order to calculate variable cost per unit, we had to divide total variable cost by the number of oranges that we did here in order to get variable cost per unit. This number goes here, gives us a contribution per unit of 0.3. Then it's a simple job of filling in this formula, which was fixed cost divided by contribution, as we did here. Look, there are other accounting formulas of doing this, but the way you have presented the information in your business exam, what we see here, you're given it in fixed cost, variable cost, selling price, and number of units. So this formula that I've showed to you is the easiest one in terms of simply taking the information and plugging it into your answer. Anything else needs a little bit more clever engineering. So this is what I recommend that you use. It's the easiest, it's the simplest, and it's the most appropriate one for the way the information is given in the question. Okay? Right. I'm going to move on to the next part, hoping we are okay with this. Because I often, this question particularly often see students sort of ignore in a way or not take it as seriously. I don't know why. Maybe because they feel that the 8 and 12 markers are are still pending, but still take the same amount of care with this one. Since it's a 3 marker, you will need to have the same sequence of your answers. 1 line for knowledge, 2 for application, and the question is asking us explain one limitation for Frank of using break-even analysis. Okay, so what we have to talk about in terms of knowledge, obviously, is break-even, and we got to show how Frank is sort of limited by the way break-even analysis works. So what can he not do with the financial, or what are the things that break-even analysis will not be able to answer? Okay, now there are three things. Okay, this is just on a separate point, so I'll sort of write it like this. There are three things or three limitations of break-even analysis. Okay, I'm going to write them here. First, they're all assumptions, right? It assumes that all products are sold. That's the first assumption it makes. Second assumption is all products are sold at the same price. That's not always the case. Okay. And thirdly, so your selling price does not change, all products change, and your, what's the third one? Let me test you. All output is sold, price is not changed. There's a third one. Let's see. Very good. Yeah, so cost curves are linear. What that means? What does that mean? It ignores something. There's a particular term I'm looking for. Ignores something. Yeah, so it very good, very good. You guys are on the right track. So how you summarize is that it ignores economies of scale, right? So it doesn't assume that your cost is going down as you continue to increase your output, right? And that's a fact, right? We know that economies of scale exist, and that's what businesses are banking on in terms of making their money. So these are the three limitations. So what you got to do, this isn't the answer. I haven't written anything yet. I'm just highlighting what are the three limitations. You just got to pick any one of these. Okay. So let's say I pick this one. This is what I'm going to talk about. So again, I will need one layer of knowledge, and I'll also need then my two layers or two things about application. Remember, this time application is firmly about Frank. We've just highlighted it that we need to show the limitation to Frank. The knowledge bit we just figured out that one limitation. So one limitation, not limitation, limitation is that it assumes all products or output will be sold. Okay, so just clearly mentioning that will do it for the knowledge level of this answer, and then you go into the application part. Okay. May have to provide discounts. Yeah, Azmin, that's also right. So what you are talking about is the second point here. Once I develop the first one, I can also do the second one by obviously taking your suggestion that some businesses have to provide discounts. For example, it's the end of the night. Frank wants to get rid of all of his fruits. He may have to sell it on a discount. Otherwise, they are perishable. He can't sell it the next day. So that's the reason where break-even may be a little bit limited. Okay. Fiza, I know external environment changes are there, but with break-even, the external environment sort of sounds like very generic. So you have to find what in the external environment. So for example, if you want to use that point, you can say that the bad weather may mean that you didn't have a good crop, and for that reason you may have to, obviously, your rotten or soon to be perishing product, you may have to sell them at a discount. Or you might say that because of weather conditions, only limited amount was harvested, and for that reason, because it's limited, you may be able to sell it at a higher price, and break-even analysis does not take that into account. So you have to find a specific thing to talk about rather than a more general statement that it's because of the external changes. Do you know what I mean? I hope I got through to you with my explanation. Okay, so we can do both of, we can do one of these, we can do one of these, right? So let me develop the application. I'll do both one by one. Okay, so if we talk about the first one, where the assumption is that um, all products are sold, so you will say that Frank, no, not fruit, Frank harvests other fruits including oranges, or just fruits, I guess, including oranges, and sells at the market, right? So first set up the situation, and then I'll continue that due to high competition, there may be there may be leftover produce at the end of the day, right? And what it does is that it changes, so changing your break even prediction, right? Basically what that means is, if you don't sell your targeted output today, and if it's unsold, then you'll have to do more tomorrow. So you'll have to do more calculation, because more produce means more cost, and all those things come into play. So this is where I've used the first point here, this one, that all products are sold. It assumes that he goes to the market, there's a competition, he may not be able to sell everything, and that may mean the break even is not usable. If we were to use the second point, right, if this was your choice, remember, you don't have to do both, you have to have just one limitation. So don't waste your time on two. But if you're talking about this one, you would say that, Frank has a lot of competition and he uses competitive pricing, which means that he may have to change the price of the product when the competition changes. And break even analysis does not consider different prices. Break even is calculated at one selling price, and we know the selling price was given in the question. So I'll also mention that he is planning to sell it at 80 cents per orange. However, since he uses competitive pricing, he may have to change this, and that will change your break even analysis answers. Everybody okay with that? Menu from the previous part. You don't necessarily have to, but if you can, that would be good. So you could say here that he was planning to sell in July. Here I could have mentioned it, that in July he's planning to sell 5650 oranges, and he may sell under 5650. So using the numbers here will make your application better. But this particular one, it wasn't asking about the number, more so the qualitative side of break-even analysis. Okay. Explain which part, Shariar? Can you be more specific? Because I've done two different types of answer right now. Okay, I'll wait for your response, and then I'll come. Okay, then. But first one, products are sold. So I'm just explaining here that What is he planning to do in July with the break even? What he's thinking is, I've got to sell 5650 oranges, and he sells them at a market, right? So I'm setting up my application. And the problem is that since you're highly competitive, you know that you won't be able to sell all your product. There's options for the consumer. So it's logical to assume that you will have some leftover product. But break even says there's no leftover product, you will sell everything. So I'm just trying to make the connection between that. Here I made the connection with these, right? Oranges, the target of 5650, the break even prediction of 4500. That's where the connection is. For example, in this part here towards the end, changing the break even prediction, you could also mention here that your break even will come later than 4500 oranges. Okay, so with those numbers, with the reference to the type of product, that's where you make the connection. Okay. All right, let's move on now. By this time in your exams, you would have gone through 10 marks worth of answers. For your first part A1, identify, shouldn't take you more than a minute. For your 3 mark questions, let's say you take 5 minutes, let's say 5 minutes, right? So, and your calculation, maybe another 4 minutes. So you would have gone through 15 minutes is what your target is to get through part A and B. Okay, 15 minutes. And I'm being generous, right? The 3 markers, I'm giving you 5 minutes. For calculation, it's almost the same. So you're thinking 15 to 16 minutes. Even at home, a good way to sort of get your practice good is that at home, read the case study when you're practicing, and give yourself the target that you're going to do part A and B only in 15 minutes. Set yourself a timer, and obviously be truthful to yourself, right? Take out a new case study, read the case study first, and then 15-minute timer. Give it 17 maybe if you have to, but 15 minutes to be on the dot, part A and B only. And then you stop and see if you manage it in the time. Then for part C and D, the 8 and 12 marker, give yourself half an hour, right? Exactly half an hour. And the way to divide it is that you have 16 minutes for the 8 marker, you have 12 minutes for the 8 marker, and about 18 minutes for your 12 marker. So 12 and 18 to divide the 8 and 12 marker. That way at home, a lot of you I know have been talking about time management, because you take the case study and it's, the whole form, 45 minutes, but maybe you can do my time management in parts. So for A and B in 15 minutes, C and D in 30 minutes, that should do the 45-minute case study in time. Okay, so let's look at part D, remind ourselves of what it was. Here it is. Analyze 2 benefits to Frank of operating as a sole trader. Now, once again, remember that the process of attempting any question like this is, first, you look at the number of marks. If it says 8, then it will definitely start with the command word of analyze. And if you see these 2 things, what that means that your answer will ask for 2 points. So 2 points. And each point needs to be a combination of enough to get 1 mark for knowledge, 1 for application, and 2 for analysis. As long as you do that, this is your answering format, right? 2 points, each point with this, straightforward. And the next thing you do is that since you need knowledge, application, and analysis, start dividing your question into these 3. That where is the knowledge? What are we being tested on? What do we have to apply it to? What do they want us to analyze? I want your help in this one. When you read this question, tell me which, and literally you are picking out the words. Which word or words in there are telling you that this is what the knowledge is about in this question? I want to wait for your response. Anybody? This is the most critical part. You do this right, this little bit of brainstorming a minute before answering the question, you get it absolutely right. Good. Now we're seeing some action. Okay, of course there's a delay. My bad. So no, Vanya, Max, half of it is right. Hala, absolutely right. The way to know what the knowledge part in this question is identify which word in there can you define in a single line business definition, right? I can't define analyze as a business concept. I can't define benefits as a business concept. I can't define operating in one line. What I can define as a business concept in this whole question is sole trader. Single owner of a business who has complete control over decision making. So, the moment you identify that this is what you can define, it means that this is what the question wants to reward you on in terms of knowledge. Okay? So, what that means is that as long as in your answer you're talking about sole traders, you'll get your mark for knowledge. For example, if I mention you can sell shares, there is limited liability, I'd be wrong because that's a limited company. But if we're talking about unlimited liability, if I'm talking about all profits to themselves, that is facts about sole trader. As long as you talk about sole trader, you get your 2 mark for knowledge. Okay, this I can guarantee you guys, this little process that you do before answering the question is the most important part of writing the answer. Knowing what to write is more important than just starting and then figuring out. And the way to do that is figure out what knowledge is. They want us to focus on sole trader. As long as I do that, I get my 2 marks for knowledge. Okay. Application is the business situation or whatever the business is trying to do. What part of the case do they want us to focus on? And the moment I see this question, I see that they want us to talk about how Frank is operating, which means running his entire business. And his business is spread over primary sector and tertiary sector, right? So decision making, investments, doing all the work, deciding the starting time of the business, the ending time of the business. So anything that Frank has control over, that's what you got to talk about, his entire business. So as long as I talk about Frank's business and things that he does, whether that's deciding what to grow on the farm, whether that's deciding which products to sell in the market, what variety of fruits to offer, anything that he does, you can refer to that in the case study. Okay, and then your evaluation is the easiest part. The question will tell you how many analysis they need and what type, and in this one the only things that's left to highlight really is 2 benefits, which means that they want us to focus on the advantages that Frank has of choosing to operate as a sole trader. Okay, that's what the question is. And if I sort of reword it, rephrase it in my mind, it becomes like this. Well, Frank decided to become a sole trader. How did he benefit from doing that? That sequence is telling me that that's my answer. And the format of my answer is given here. I need 2 paragraphs, each with at least this much level of difficulty in it. Okay. So we already know, as a lot of you are also mentioning here, that the benefit of being a sole trader is that you don't have to share the profits. Obviously, you make all the decisions yourself. you make faster decisions. Those could be, and since we're talking about Frank, which is a farm, we can talk about the hours of going to the market to sell the product, the hours of going to the farm and picking the fruit. You can also make an argument for faster decision making to, decide which fruits to grow this season as opposed to next season. That could be taken quickly rather than, if it was a different type of business. So those are, any two of those points are what you need to show with some analysis and application in your answer. Okay. So I'm going to start my answer. Just got to remind you again that things that where we saw that he was a sole trader was mentioned here. So Frank is a sole trader, operates in the primary and tertiary sector. He set his own objectives, so that is also something we can use in the application. He also decides himself what range of fruit to be sold, and that means complete decision making power. We can also compare this thing that he has a target profitability of 25%, which means that he gets to keep all the profit to himself. So there's all of these little pieces of information that we need to use to process it into a nice answer. I'm going to do that for you. Do first paragraph at least here. Okay, so the way to answer this, and I will repeat this again, is still a huge misconception about this. A definition carries maybe 0.25 of marks, okay, no more than that, because what you're being rewarded on is being identified, that identifying the right benefit. But I understand that a lot of students still feel that starting off with a definition sort of gives you structure, and it gives you a starting point. It's something you're used to, so it's a good place to begin your answer with. So go ahead and do define what the knowledge is in this question. And we just saw that the knowledge here we highlighted was a sole trader. So just in 1-2 lines, explain what it means. It means that single owner and manager of business. Okay, and what I always recommend for your 8 markers is that bring in some business context straight away in the first paragraph, right? Bring some application, that how do you know Frank is a sole trader, right? And we saw that he talked about that he redundancy money, after being made redundant, he used his redundancy money to avoid sharing control, and he set up FF. So just sort of give a background in the first paragraph. So it's sort of like you're talking to the examiner and telling him that, look, I know the knowledge you want me to talk about, so here's the sole trader definition. I know whose situation I'm going to talk about, so here's where Frank became a sole trader. And now I'm going to show you the 2 benefits that Frank has as a sole trader in this business. Okay, so it's sort of like a background before going into the main juice of your answer, which is where you have to explain your first benefit, and that's where you start getting the knowledge marks now. So the benefit, first of all, is that Frank can make all business decisions on his own, right? So mentioning that clearly, and if you think about it, this statement is a very factual statement, right? These are things that you would have learned in your books, in your notes, or wherever, from me or whoever else. So what your fact about the business is, the benefit that you got to mention it clearly, because that's where the knowledge mark is coming from. And then what you have to do over your next layers of application and analysis is basically prove this point of knowledge, that I'm going to show you that how Frank is taking businesses decision himself and how is that a good thing for him. Okay, so then the application, you will need at least 2 layers. Doesn't work out without it. Okay, so first is that, again, going back to the case study, we can use things such as Frank decides the range of fruits that are being sold throughout the year. And what this has done is that it has made them a very successful business. And it's now so successful that they are considering charging price skimming, which might be a way to increase the revenue of the business. So I'm using as much information as I can from this piece, and then I'm going to make my application out of it. Okay, so Frank decides which range of fruits are sorry, just let me erase this, make some room for application 1, then I'll come back to this. The fruits are to be sold throughout the year, right? And what it has done for the business, remember, I'm still bringing in business context in my application, and this has created a strong USP for FF. Okay, so it's all, remember, applications all about explaining what's changed in the business. This concept that you're talking about, that he's made this decision himself, how has that transpired, how has that played out in the business, and this is how it has played out, right? And then because of this, what is the benefit? That analysis must have 3 layers. Okay, and again, when I said layers, I do not mean it must have 3 separate sentences, right? What it means is that show the impact on the business, but don't straight away get to the point that, oh, it leads to increase in sale. Explain that how one thing leads to another, that leads to another, and that eventually will mean the company makes more profit. Okay, so what I'm emphasizing on is that as soon as you talk about this, or they have a USP, don't immediately write that this will lead to increase in profit, and that will happen, but a couple of things have to happen before that, and before reaching a higher profitability level. So explain that situation. Okay, and what I will say here, again, using information from the kit, is since they have a USP, it creates competitive advantage, right? And the best way to make most of this competitive advantage is to consider, remember, he hasn't done this, so consider changing to price skimming, and by doing this you'll be able to achieve the objective of 25% profitability. Remember, this was given in the case study, so I'm just bringing that information faster. Okay, so the benefit is that the objective that he had set, he'll be able to reach there more quickly because he can make the decision himself of going to price skimming. And why is he going for price skimming? Because there's a competitive advantage resulting from the decision he had taken about which fruits to sell, which created a USP. So if you see this whole point from this knowledge here to this here, this is what counts as one complete point, which you might call a paragraph. And remember, this is the crucial bit. Each point of knowledge, application, and analysis, like you see here for an 8 marker, remember that it's as easy as 1, 2, 3. What that means is that you will need first one clear statement of knowledge, which we did here, then 2 of application, right? So again, 1 for knowledge we did, then we did 2 for application, and then 3 layers of analysis. So 1, 2, 3. You combine those, that's the minimum you need to present. Obviously, you go in more detail depending on what your understanding and what the information in the case study is, but this is the minimum that you will have to present. Okay? Profit margin will bring back the firm. Yeah, Mania, absolutely right. Absolutely right. So when I say, from here, you and I are slightly deviating in our answers toward the next line, but we are both correct. So you could talk about that. But you know what I would recommend, Vanya, is that when you talk about things such as increased efficiency by investing in machinery, in productivity, that's all true. But try to look for things for which you can find some clue in the case study, right? For example, the case study, they haven't really mentioned yet they're looking for expansion, or machinery is on the mind. So look for things that you can easily connect, or 1 or 2 things. That's why I brought in profitability. But you wouldn't be wrong. But it's just you're more likely to get full marks if there's application throughout your answer, even in your analysis, even in your evaluation. Yeah, yes, Ali, that's basically the gist of what I had also just explained. So yeah, absolutely. Okay, so one is the decision making. Another point, again, there are many advantages of being a sole trader. So at this point, I would change my paragraph. We'll just sort of make not a dotted, but a dashed line here. So it's indicating that I'm going to new paragraph. And then again, follow the same sequence. Knowledge 1, application 2, analysis 3, right? And I can talk about that he gets to keep all the profit. I can talk about that he gets to choose the working conditions. Let's talk about working conditions, right? Why not? So, sole traders can choose their own working conditions, right? And then how will I link it to the case study? Well, I know that they are involved in 2 different parts. I'm going to write this one in more short form because I want to get to the 12 marker. So I can mention is that, well, they are part of the primary sector, right? Which is all about extracting, I should call harvesting because we're talking about fruits here. Plus, there's also a part of the business which is in the tertiary sector, right? Which is where it has to be sold at the market. Now, the benefit of Frank being a sole trader is what comes into my analysis. And again, 3 layers, 3 things to say. Remember, it doesn't have to be 3 different sentences. I keep repeating that. But at least 3 points of analysis combining to form a full benefit. That's what you need to do. Okay. So what I can write is that Frank can decide the best harvesting time, right, which he does, and this allows him to pick fresh produce, fresher produce compared to competitors, right? And this allows him to get his product first to the market, making FF successful. Okay. So this again a second way that he can decide when to work, how to work, and because he can decide, he picks the right time to pick the fruit, get it to the market, get it there faster because his competition has to get it from hundreds of kilometers away. Well, he doesn't have to do that. Okay. You could have also talked about, you have full control over profit. So whatever he sells, there my application could have been that his objective is to increase the profitability by 15% by July 2025. And if he meets his break-even targets and get to his profit, then he will get to keep all of it to himself. So you could have gone that way either. All right, Vanya, thank you. You've been great help. Good luck. Watch the rest of it later. But for others, we're still continuing. This would be then your second point. Again, 1 layer of knowledge, 2 for application, 3 for analysis. You do that, that starts looking like a good 8-mark answer. Yes, Ali, that was good analysis. Again, with a little bit more meat and words in there should be okay. I am in no control of paper cancellation. Let's hope for everybody's sake that things are back to normal and you guys have your exams and we all move on in our lives. That's the best hope I have. So that's we're now through 3 of the 4 parts. I want to get to the last one now. I know a lot of you may still struggle with 12 markers, so let's look at it. And this one says evaluate whether Frank should introduce price skimming. Okay, a very, very straightforward question. But just reminding ourselves that for any 12 marker, you're rewarded 2 marks for knowledge, 2 for application, 2 for analysis, and 6 for evaluation. Okay? And when I read this question, which says evaluate whether Frank should introduce price skimming, I know that the concept that's being tested here, right, is price skimming. That's the only thing I can define in this question, right? So as long as I talk about that, I'll be okay for knowledge. And again, guys, I would emphasize that you take this process into your exams and do this little bit of brainstorming. Divide your question into these requirements and you'll know what to write about and where to place it in your formats. So in terms of knowledge, as long as I talk about pricing and price skimming, I should be okay. What do we have to talk about in terms of application? Obviously, it's Frank's decision. It's his business. He is the sole trader, right? The question is, analysis is whether they should introduce it or not. So should or should not depends on obviously the advantages and disadvantages, right? And advantages or disadvantages are something that we discuss in the analysis part of your answer. And then that leaves us with simply evaluating whether he should do it or not. We'll have to give some form of decision in the end. Okay. Sorry, did I miss a comment? Kahan, I think so. With application, there are in paper 2. First, anything that you want to use as a business context must come from the case study, right? So the way to do that is, for example, when we'll be answering this question, price skimming, when if you know the question is going to be price skimming, then any part of the case study where pricing is discussed, you keep those aside for a question on pricing. For example, in the last question of sole trader, we saw that he was choosing which fruits to sell. We only know to highlight that part because we knew that the question had asked us about sole traders. So whatever knowledge part you've identified in the question, if you just highlight anything related to that concept in the case study and use that to bring application, that makes it better, right? For example, if there was a question on motivation, I would highlight things such as number of employees, their payment methods, their complaints and things like that, because anything linked to employees might be used in an answer with motivation. So the idea is to find similar concepts to that knowledge point and then answer them as best as you can. Okay. But in paper two, stay within the case study. There is no room for assumptions. And one thing that the examiners hate, they absolutely hate this, it's simply copying a line from the case study and presenting it in your answer as application. They very clearly say that reproduction of content from the case study into your answer does not qualify as application. Now, obviously, the smart ones of you will use those lines and paraphrase it, change the word, maybe move the sequence around, or explain it. Just explain what they're happening in the business, how they're changing, rather than simply copying straight lines. Right? So, just a few tips to remember. Can evaluation be given at each of the analysis at a separate? Yeah, so I'm going to talk about that today, right? So, what Shahryar is asking, that should evaluation be separate? Should it be done together? Both forms are fine, right? But what I recommend is that you leave a little bit of evaluation at the end of analysis, and that way you don't have to spend too much time on the final evaluation. A. B, when you're answering, especially let's say you're on the last case studies 12 marker, you won't have a lot of time and you want to get your evaluation in there as well. So rather than waiting for the final paragraph for all the evaluation to come through, if you're doing it paragraph by paragraph, one line here, one line there, then you're at least taking some chance with it as well. So that's why I think, in the interest of time management, in the interest of more completeness, plus I also see, and it happens with me also, that if I'm analyzing and I'm thinking of an evaluation point can go here, and I convince myself that no, let's save it for later, I won't remember it. I'm so nervous in an exam that I wouldn't remember what points I had 5 minutes ago. So if something sounds appropriate, sounds like an evaluation, and you can present it over there, then you do it, or reserve it for later. Like I said, it's more of a comfort thing for each student rather than matter of correctness in the eyes of the examiner. Okay. Yeah. So exactly right. Altogether, very good. That what altogether means. I can P1. I gave conclusion at each paragraph to save. Yeah, so that's perfect. You have to give it in the end, the final evaluation, because evaluation means you have to decide on something, and that decision can only come after an argument has been presented in the earlier paragraph. So the last evaluation paragraph has to be there. Yeah. Anyway, so the question is whether Frank should introduce price skimming. And if you just go back to the case study, all we know about pricing is that first, he sells his fruit at 80 cents a piece. He works in a competitive market. He has a USP by selling fresher fruit and a wider variety. Now, both of those indicate that if he has better product, if he has a USP, if he can bring it faster, then surely price skimming works. So we'll have to talk about price skimming first. But Frank currently uses competitive pricing. So right now, Frank also has 2 points of comparison. A, what he has right now, which is competitive pricing. B, what he wants to bring in, price skimming. So wherever I write a 12 marker, I always divide it into three parts. And just the way the information is given in this case study, it sort of makes it easier in the sense that when I'm dividing my answer into my three paragraphs, the first one will still be a combination of knowledge, application, analysis, evaluation. That's my first paragraph. Second paragraph, exactly the same. And then my third paragraph is my evaluation. Okay. And since this question said that, well, consider price skimming, so what I'll do is I'll spend my first paragraph on price skimming, talk about its advantage and disadvantage to the business. Then sticking to competitive pricing, since that's also something that they're doing right now, I'll discuss its advantages and disadvantages. Excuse me. And then I will come to the decision. Which is better? Should he change it or should he not change it? What impact would it have on other things? Blah, blah, blah. So this is what my sequence of answer looks like when I look at this question. Okay. So I'll start with the first one, which is obviously about price skimming. So I can start with its definition, right? So what is price skimming? Explain that here. Excuse me. Let me just have a sip of water. Yeah, so this is charging higher than competitors. Okay, now explain this situation, that why is he even considering doing this, right? And he's considering doing this because FF has a USP, which is a result of freshness and variety. Product. Right? And another layer that he is currently charging 80 cents 80 cents per orange, but wants to increase prices, right? So just application is setting up the situation. What is happening? What is he currently charging? Then what does he already have to force, or to make him consider going for price skimming? So because he's at an 80-cent price, he's fresh, blah blah blah. The analysis is that by changing to price skimming, he can earn more revenue per orange, right? And that obviously increases the total sales. What it also does is it brings the break even point closer. Excuse me. So notice how I wouldn't be able to maybe bring break even point in if I was attempting the 12 marker before attempting the calculation, right? So therefore, I always say go in the sequence, and then whatever you've unlocked in the case study, use as much of it as you can in your 12 marker. And here I'm using it to support my analysis, right? Since you're bringing break-even analysis closer, obviously it will end up increasing the profitability. Okay. Then before you move on, and as we were discussing a little bit earlier, throw in a bit of evaluation before going to the next part, right? Yes, price skimming is good, revenue is increasing, break even, profitability, blah blah blah, all that is great. However, price skimming is temporary. Okay, what that means is that whatever you're doing, your competition will soon get a sniff of it, try to do what you're doing, and then obviously come up to the same price level as you are, so you won't have that competitive advantage for too long. So pricing is temporary, and competition, you can say competition or new entrants may catch up and reduce FF sale. Okay, so there's a catch to it. That's basically what I want to say. And then with a little bit of evaluation done, I can move on to my second paragraph here, which I had reserved for a discussion on competitive, right? So again, make it a full knowledge application analysis evaluation paragraph. I will start by defining that, well, right now they are using competitive pricing, right? So explain this is that increase or decrease with competition's prices. Salar, evaluations can be cons, evaluation can be a decision, evaluation can be a recommendation, evaluation can be something you say in support, evaluation can be something you say in against of it. So don't always think that evaluation is just the opposite side. It can be the opposite side, it can be further supporting the positive side, it could be saying that this is good for you, this is not good for you, this will work, this won't work. So it's more general, it's not just the cons of it. Okay. um, so the application of it for competitive prices, we know that since you are comparing it to the competition, you'll have to discuss the competition in its application. And again, if I can take you to the case study, they told us that they have two main competitors. There's a national supermarket and there's a local city shop. So mentioning these, that there's a lot of competition, and things like fruit and like groceries, people always want the best price, right? Consumers are always looking for the best price. So I want to use that situation here. And I'll explain that there is first strong competition from a supermarket, which basically is a large business, and local city shops, right? Which is, I guess, a small similar business like FF. Excuse me. And because there's a lot of competition, I was just thinking of a point. Competition, yeah. Consumers like to compare prices of food and fruit before making the purchase. So just setting up the situation that why am I talking about competitive pricing? Then the advantage is that your FF will not be negatively impacted, since their oranges will be sold at the same price as competition. Right. So basically, what I'm trying to say here is that it's not really an advantage. It's not really a disadvantage. If the competition increases price, you increase the price. So the consumer does not have to worry about the price. And in a way, actually, what I can bring here as another advantage is that since FF has a superior product with similar prices, FF should sell more. Okay, so basically what I'm saying here is that competitive pricing means that if the competition selling that orange for 90 cents, then FF will also sell it for 90 cents, right? So if competition increases the price, FF will also increase it. If competition decreases it, then FF will also decrease it. So what that means is that price is basically a non-factor, right? FF is taking price out of the equation. That look, he's saying to the consumer that if you want to go to that shop, you'll get it for 90 cents. You come to my shop, you also get it for 90 cents. So don't worry about the price. Come and look at the product. And we know that FF already has a superior product. They have a USP to show for it. So I'm saying that it might be better for them to remain competitive because the quality of the product is what's going to get them more sales rather than charging a higher price for it. And just to evaluate that, what using competitive pricing means is that FF is losing out on additional revenue which could be made using price skimming, right? So basically that they have a USP but they're not using it. So this is wastage of USP, right? You have a USP and we know that as long as you have a USP, you go for price skimming. But if they don't, then clearly it's at a loss for them. Right, so I have, as I had indicated, sorry, just gonna take you to the top. As I had indicated, first I'll spend some time on price skimming. That's what I did here in the first paragraph. Then on competitive pricing, which is what I did here. And then I have to now look at my final evaluation. What is it that they should do? Remember the question asked, evaluate whether Frank should introduce price skimming. So we made an argument for skimming, we made an argument for competitive. Now comes the final evaluation. Now the good thing of the way we've done the answer is that even though you haven't yet reached your final paragraph, you've already got some evaluation in your answer, right? So I think we've already got 2 to 3 marks worth of evaluation in the answer. Now you just gotta sum it up. And a good way to make sure that you're covering most things in your final paragraph is basically a checklist that I use in my mind whenever I'm going through the final evaluation part. Is that first of all, I have to make a decision whether they should do it or shouldn't do it. I have to not be on the fence, right? Recommend something. And if I'm saying do it, then it has to come through as a proper recommendation. So either a decision or a recommendation that could be part of your final evaluation. Anything you want to say in support, that yeah, doing this is a good idea because it leads to something else that you want to do. So anything further in support, that's also evaluation. Or if you think this is creating an obstacle for something else, right? And here in the last two parts, especially the support and obstacle part, what you should explore in your answers is perhaps support or obstacle, both from two parts, one to the other departments. So think that how it might impact marketing, finance, operations, HR, and how there might be anything that's changing in the external environment that might either support or create an obstacle. So it's like a checklist, right? And I use that. First I have to decide, is price skimming right or wrong for them? Yes or no? Recommend. And then substantiate, support my argument by any of this, right? So first of all, a decision. Should they go for should they go for price skimming? My recommendation stands on the yes side. Okay, they're already a successful business. So one, successful with USP, right? Sorry guys, my phone's ringing. I just shut that off. Who was it? Yeah, so successful business with USP, therefore they should change to skimming. Okay. Secondly, if they are going for price skimming, always remember something that I said a little bit earlier, that you always bring a discussion of price elasticity of demand in evaluation whenever you're suggesting a change in price. So you can mention here that it depends on the price elasticity of demand, right? And just mention that inelastic is better, which means that if you change the price a lot, it still doesn't bring down your sales. So inelastic might be better, right? Thirdly, you also have to consider that pricing is just one part of your marketing mix, right? Pricing is just one factor. Other P's also important, right? And since they haven't mentioned anything here about promotion, maybe I can bring that as, as a recommendation. That maybe focus on promotion more. That would also help you. And in the end, pricing, I guess if you're gonna charge a higher price, it also depends on income levels, right? If people are willing to pay a higher price for oranges or not. So it's always in the end, a decision, recommendation, anything else related to these factors. That's what you bring in. Yeah, you can write depending factors as I did as well. Yeah. You can also, I guess, say here that since Frank's fruit is fresher and he's got his own techniques of, I guess, doing farming, if he can keep that a secret, right, and that means that he will always be better than the competition and he'll always be able to charge a higher price. So price skimming might actually work. Okay, so Don't don't be on the fence in your final evaluation. Give a decision. That's important. No decisions wrong. They just need to know that you're able to pick a side and stand behind it. And ladies and gents, that should do it for this paper. Whew. Looks kind of neat. It's one of my neater attempts at a past paper, if truth be told. I quite like it. Hopefully, you do too. So I'll bring that here. So that there's space. Yeah. Okay. So, guys, that's March 2025, the first case study in its entirety done in front of you. To the best of my efforts, I hope this was useful. You can tell that I enjoyed it because I'm here for much longer than I was initially planning to. So thanks for being here, making my job better. It's better to talk to people and teach than just be teaching. So yeah, no, there's no debt to be repaid. The debt you owe is to yourself. You spent a full year doing this. You owe it to yourself to do well. So take in all the advice that anyone with the right advice. Take all those pieces of advice. Sleep well, eat well, be good human beings, and the rewards shall come your way. Okay, so best of luck. I know tomorrow's a Sunday. You'll get to take it easy. I remember you guys in my prayers. You do the same for me, and hopefully things go smoothly and you come across from the other side with flying colors. Okay, thumbs up all the way for you too. And do let us know how your exams went. And hopefully we'll be able to improve your grades a little bit by doing these sessions. With more to come, don't forget to check out lots of cool stuff at our store, on the platform. Maybe something we'll take on the last day might help you. Okay, thank you. I'm gonna take my leave. You've been a great audience. Bye bye. Allah Hafiz. Good luck and Godspeed.